Hello, Morongo Basin, and listeners around the world online at Z107.7 FM.com. Here is the Z107.7 Local News for Monday, March 3rd, 2025. A 29 Palms man out on bail was arrested on suspicion of being in possession of a weapon, drugs, and stolen property, along with utility theft. On Thursday at around 10:45 a.m., detectives with the San Bernardino Sheriff's Morongo Basin Station served a search warrant in the 68,800 block of Rainier Road in 29 Palms. The Sheriff's Department says that they located a loaded rifle, ammunition, suspected methamphetamine, a stolen 40-inch Connex box worth approximately $7,000, and an electrical meter bypass. Detectives, working in association with Southern California Edison, say that the suspect, identified as Eduardo Valseca, a 50-year-old resident of 29 Palms, stole approximately $50,000 of electricity. Valseca was released on bail on January 31st after he was placed into custody for suspicion of receiving known stolen property that included a stolen Connex box. Eduardo Valseca was arrested on suspicion of possession of a controlled substance while armed with a loaded firearm and receiving known stolen property. He was booked into the Morongo Basin Jail on $290,000 bail. A second weekend of demonstrations took place during a busy and warm weekend here in the high desert. Online news editor Robert Hayden has more.
Hundreds of people gathered at the corner of Park Boulevard and Highway 62 on Saturday morning to protest the mass terminations that have hit the National Park Service since Valentine's Day weekend. 6 probationary rangers were part of the first round of terminations here at Joshua Tree National Park, with the specter of more terminations hanging over the remaining rangers at the National Park as it enters into spring, its busiest season. The National Park Service says it plans to hire more seasonal workers. However, Elon Musk's Office of Personnel Management has sent a second email to federal workers asking for a list of 5 things they've done each week. This time, the email didn't have a threat of termination via resignation if workers don't respond, a threat that ultimately turned out to be an empty one. This time, the email states that replying with 5 things you've done each week will become a new requirement moving forward. The protest moved inside Joshua Tree National Park around noon when a group demonstrated at Cap Rock, a popular climbing destination in the park. An upside-down American flag was hung at Intersection Rock as well as near the entrance to the park earlier that morning. An inverted American flag is typically seen as a symbol of distress, either for a small group of people or representing the country as a whole. Despite some calls on social media for counter-protests, there wasn't obvious evidence of a large enough group of people providing an alternative message to the demonstration's chants of Save Our Parks. Reporting for Z107.7 News, I'm Robert Hayden.
The Yucca Valley Animal Shelter is the topic of conversation at tomorrow's meeting of the Yucca Valley Town Council. At the council's last meeting in February, several members of the community raised concerns regarding operations and protocol at the animal shelter run by the town of Yucca Valley, specifically fees, transparency, and the shelter's euthanasia rates. At tomorrow's meeting, the town council will receive an update on the shelter with a preliminary report stating that town staff is confident in the efficacy of the shelter. The council will receive an update on the latest draft of the Western Joshua Tree Conservation Plan and a budget report for the last 6 months. Tomorrow's meeting of the Yucca Valley Town Council is open to the public and begins at 5 p.m. at the Yucca Valley Community Center. Tomorrow's meeting of the 29 Palms Planning Commission will focus on the housing element and general plan status annual reports. Annalise Kuiper joins us with details.
Located at City Hall, 6136 Adobe Road in 29 Palms, the meeting starts at 5 p.m. Public hearings will address the progress made towards meeting the goals of the housing element. These reports are meant to give detailed information regarding building permit activity, which includes both planning and building permit applications for housing developments, the type of housing, and the expected income of the future residents. The recommendation is for the Planning Commission to accept and forward the Housing Element Annual Progress Report and the General Plan Status Report to the City Council. Once approved by the Planning Commission and the City Council, this report will ultimately be submitted to the State Office of Planning Research and the California Department of Housing and Community Development. Reporting for Z107.7 News, I'm Annalise Kuiper.
And finally, a large-scale woven art piece made locally in the desert is set to hang in the U.S. Embassy in Erbil, Iraq, but you can see it tomorrow before it's flown to the embassy. Janelle Peterzak, artist and owner of All Road Studio in Yucca Valley, was commissioned by the government to create a massive weaved art piece for the embassy several years ago.
Well, the Art in Embassies program, which is a State Department program, reached out to me 8+ years ago. The curator reached out to make a commissioned weaving for a new embassy building in Erbil, Iraq, which is where, like, the citadel, there's a big citadel there. I didn't hear from them for 3 years. Like, I moved to the desert, and during COVID, they emailed and they're like, okay, it's on. I've been working on it for 5 years. I wove most of it, but then I had various people helping me over the years. I had a loom set up for a while where if you came in to hang out with me in the studio, I taught you how to weave and you wove some of it. I'm excited to be done.
The finished piece is more than 20 feet by 20 feet, and Peterzak described it as inspired by the architecture of the citadel in Erbil that will house the embassy.
But it's 3 panels. It's a woven textile piece, and they wanted me to be inspired by the citadel, which is the oldest inhabited building on the planet. There's like these arched columns on part of the citadel. There's an arched shape at the top of each one. And then all the colors in the piece are taken from tile work throughout the citadel. Really bright, saturated colors from the tile. A lot of the material in the piece, it's like cotton rope, we sent out to have dyed, so we matched special colors. There's also brass. There's big sheets of brass on it, too. It's really shiny.
Peterzak says she will be displaying the finished piece for a few hours on Tuesday before it's flown to Iraq with other pieces commissioned for the embassy.
Come to our little art show that we're doing in the parking lot on Tuesday, March 4th from 2 to 4. We're going to hang it up for a couple hours. It's going to be like a parking lot art show.
Stop by from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. tomorrow at All Road Studio, located at 55879 29 Palms Highway in Yucca Valley. That's our local news. Hear local news 7 times a day, 7 days a week at 7, 8, 9, noon, 4, 5, and 6. If you hear about news happening, let us know. Email us at tips@Z107.7fm.com. Reporting for the Morongo Basin News Leader, the award-winning Z107.7 Local News, I'm News Director Jeff Harmatz.